Hey everybody, this is going to be kind of a goofy Wednesday video. I've got my bow and arrows. Funny story about this. So, back when this all first began, this whole pandemic situation, when I look back on it now, I think about how absolutely panicked I was so much of the time. And I knew I needed to do something about just the sort of general level of adrenaline and anxiety and fight or flight that I was feeling. And it occurred to me that archery might be sort of interesting. Well, it turns out I wasn't the only one having that idea, because shortly about thereafter, I'm not doing this well this morning. A friend of mine said, "Hey, do this with me. I'm taking archery classes online." Oops. And I was like, no kidding, because I was just asking around to some friends to see if anybody had some equipment I could borrow. And sure enough, and so on, and that's how I ended up with most of this. So that is what I've been doing for the last however many Saturdays, mostly. And I gotta say, it is pretty profound. It seems to me... Oh yeah, that was a good one. Most of us sort of intuitively know that in order to combat just the general sort of heightened state of anxiety, or what's called hypervigilance, which is sort of just paying attention to too much all the time, that we need to sort of focus our mind elsewhere. Typically, we do that through distractions. We've talked in vestry meetings about people's various addictions to like Candy Crush and any sort of like swipey phone games. And that can work for a while, because basically you just take that sort of like hypervigilant part of your brain, and there's all kinds of stuff we can talk about in terms of the amygdala and reptile brain and all the stuff that people love to talk about these days. And basically sort of refocus all that energy on swiping critters across a screen, or, shooting quarks, as my dad used to say. So this is similar, but actually importantly different, because this is an embodied sort of practice. So I tell you, this has been kind of magical. Not only do I get to run around with a bow and arrow in the woods and look like Katniss for any Hunger Games fans, or at least this is what I imagine myself to look like. Yeah. But the whole thing is, it's this whole process that requires such intense concentration. And if you're somebody who, is like, oh, I should meditate or do centering prayer, and the whole like sitting still and focusing your mind on your breath thing is just not going to happen, or if that's something you used to do but find it particularly challenging during these times, this kind of thing, whoops, I keep doing that this morning. Oh, yeah, that was better. This kind of thing might be up your alley. And the reason is, there's so many things you have to pay attention to that it's hard to get lost in the noise and the grinding thoughts and what's called rumination. So as I have definitely been struggling in these weeks to find the kind of quiet and restorative depths of prayer and meditation without doing something like running a few miles first, or just doing ridiculous things to kind of wear myself out a little bit, which is also useful. Gardening, digging trenches, shoveling compost, all of these things can work. This in particular has been really, really helpful, because for one, I'm outside, always a bonus. Two, there's just enough of an element of danger that you don't want to not be paying attention, right? Like, these can hurt you, even though they're just field tips, or other people, right? So there's that. Then focusing on a target, I feel like, is like really incredible training. Like, this is what I need to do the rest of my day today. There's a target. I really need to focus all of my attention on it. and not to everything else that's happening, or the truck out on the road, or the construction over there, or etc. But actually to be really focused on the target or the goal or the task at hand. That, I feel like, is a sort of retraining, a part that counterbalances the sort of hypervigilant, like, what's that sound? What's that sound? What's that sound? What does that mean? What do I have to do over here? Do I have to think about this thing? Oh, I have to do this other project. It's exhausting just to think about what the sort of like internal radio station is playing. And then there's the kind of strength thing. So this instructor who's teaching online, who's super great, walks us through this whole kind of thing. First, get your feet planted in line with the target. And then, there's this whole thing about where the bow is supposed to be in regards to your arm, and how your arm is in your elbow, and where you hit your face, and how you concentrate. And then where your breath is, too. That's a pretty good one. So, suddenly I'm training my body, my whole body, my back, my core strength, stuff that, especially for women, we don't have a lot of strength in unless we really intentionally develop it. And so I am training and practicing and bringing more and more attention and intention and awareness to what it feels like in my body to be focused but relaxed. Wow, is that the opposite of the first few weeks of this pandemic, when nobody knew which end was up, and I was panicked about whether grocery stores were going to be open and so on. So, running around with a bow and arrow in the woods might not be your thing. But I have to say, this has been so incredibly valuable for me that I really invite you all to think about what might be useful for you. The older I get, or the more years I'm at this whole spiritual practice thing, the more I just keep learning and relearning and deepening my understanding that a spiritual life is not something apart from a bodily life. Man, I wish somebody had told me that about 30 years ago. That they're actually deeply ingrained. And I think, this is why so many people are doing Eastern stuff, like yoga and various kinds of Buddhist meditation, Tai Chi, which is like super accessible to people of all kinds of bodily conditions. I think we in the West are a little slow to catch up on the fact that spirit and thought and relationships and all of these sorts of things, relationships to the planet, oh my gosh, the air that we breathe, all these green trees, none of this happens outside of or apart from our bodies. So, I think particularly in Christianity, we have a lot to remember, and if we can't remember, reimagine in terms of what our hearts long for in terms of our connection to God, ourselves, and one another. So why not archery? Why not candles? Why not walks? The point is, thinking alone isn't going to get us there. Just sitting with our thoughts and our feelings, especially if we're already physically going through, sort of heightened stuff because of trauma or, a global pandemic, we might need to get a little more creative. Even just, really slow but intentional movement, leaning from one side to the other and just being like, what does that feel like? What does that feel like? Where am I feeling it? How does gravity affect my body? I think one of the opportunities in this whole thing is to get to know ourselves as mortal beings again, and not just beings trying to escape mortality. Part of what I really appreciate, if I can even say that, I think I will. Yeah, I'm going to try that. Part of what I'm appreciating about these strange days is that suddenly we're living in relationship to the weather again. Yes, I'll meet you at such and such a place, depending on the weather. If there's not a thunderstorm, if it's, warm enough or cool enough or shady enough or sunny enough. we can't just plow through. We can't use our human wills and ingenuity to just force our way to do whatever it is we want to do whenever we want to do it, regardless of the weather. We actually have to pay attention to what's going on. That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing for us to learn or to remember. So, shooting arrows in the woods. There's certainly worse ways to pray. And I will say, it's been kind of amazing discovering, not bad, the devotional impulse that rises in me in doing this. I'm just shooting at like a cardboard box stuffed with cardboard boxes. I don't necessarily have plans to hunt, although I'm curious. But there's something in this that's changing my relationship to even the woods that I've loved for my whole life. So, yeah. So I think that's my goofy check-in. Had a great vestry meeting last night with folks. Good to see people doing well. There's deep feeling and creativity and desire to connect with everybody. And there's some projects and plans underway to facilitate our connection a bit more in the days and weeks to come. Obviously, we're still trying to get even the very basic outline of what sort of the road towards reopening would look like. And again, I just stress it's going to be slow and it's not going to look familiar for quite a while. So remember what's important. Remember that you belong to God. Remember that you are a part of creation and that there's nothing that happens. There's not a hair on your head uncounted that is outside of God's love and God's care. So all good blessings of God's peace and deep abiding love be with you now and in the week to come. Pentecost is coming. Stay tuned for info on the Great Big Diocesan Pentecost live streamed service this Sunday. Bye.